when a government agency hired a new chief information officer for a $270,000 salary, they didn't realize their perfect executive was a complete phantom. To land the job, Veronica Theriault invented
Entire past, typing up fake degrees, and even forging a massive private sector payslip just to negotiate a higher salary. But the wildest part? Passing the background check. When recruiters called her top executive reference, Veronica just used an alias, answered the phone herself, and gave her own performance a glowing review. Once inside the government agency, she immediately abused her new executive power, handing her totally unqualified brother a lucrative $21,000 IT contract. But maintaining this massive, multi-layered illusion took a toll. Within weeks, the pressure fractured her mental health, and her erratic behavior sparked official suspicion, leading anti-corruption investigators right to her office door. Her fake executive career ended with a real 25-month prison sentence, and she left the South Australian government with a massive $750,000 bill just to clean up her 7-week illusion. Invented her entire past, typing up fake degrees, and even forging a massive private sector payslip just to negotiate a higher salary. But the wildest part? Passing the background check. When recruiters called her top executive reference, Veronica just used an alias.
Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. We're looking at a true story today that, honestly, sounds like a plot pulled straight out of a Hollywood heist movie, but I assure you it is 100% real. When a high-level government agency goes looking for top-tier executive talent, you'd expect their vetting process to be an impenetrable fortress, right? Like you expect rigorous background checks? Well, today, we are unraveling the unbelievable story of Veronica Theriault. This is a woman who managed to bypass absolutely all of that, fabricating an entire government executive role literally out of thin air. We're going to break down exactly how she pulled this off, the massive financial damage she left in her wake, and the critical lessons every organization has got to learn from this catastrophic recruitment failure.
So, the big question. How exactly do you fake your way into a $270,000 a year government job? Well, back in 2017, the South Australian Department of the Premier and Cabinet, also known as the DPC, was hiring for a highly sensitive position, Chief Information Officer. Now, this is a role that oversees critical data and infrastructure, and they hired Veronica Theriault based entirely on a web of spectacular lies. This wasn't just, someone slightly padding their resume or stretching a job title. No, this was a ground-up fabrication of an entire professional identity.
Because on paper, her fabricated persona was an absolute superstar. She claimed to hold a Bachelor of Engineering in Mechanical Engineering from the University of Western Australia, topped off with an MBA from the prestigious business school INSEAD. She even invented this glittering work history, claiming executive tenures at major corporations like Wotif and PwC. But the reality? She had no such degrees and absolutely no executive history at those companies. None. But here is perhaps the most incredible detail of the whole shebang. The Chief Information Officer, a person whose literal job is to understand digital information and security, was a walking security breach herself. She actually used a photograph of the famous supermodel Kate Upton as her own professional headshot on LinkedIn. I mean, you literally can't make this stuff up.
Section 1. Escalation of deceit. Let's move to how this actually builds, because securing this job didn't just require a padded resume. It took an active, escalating campaign of fraud. She didn't just passively hope her resume would get her through the door. She aggressively manufactured the evidence to back it up, going to extreme lengths to not only get the job, but to negotiate a much higher salary than they originally intended to pay her. So, step 1. To justify that high salary, she forged a payslip from her supposed previous private sector job. Step 2. She invented a referee named Miss Best to vouch for her. Step 3. And this is where it gets truly wild. When the government recruiters called this reference, Theriault actually impersonated Miss Best on the phone. She literally acted as her own glowing reference, giving herself absolutely stellar feedback. And finally, step 4. Shortly before her facade crumbled, to bypass government medical clearances, she submitted a forged doctor's letter declaring she was fit for work, a letter she had typed up herself.
Moving on to Section 2, the financial fallout.
Now, it's easy to marvel at the sheer audacity of her con. But make no mistake, this was far from a victimless crime. The financial fallout started with the contract itself. Theriault successfully negotiated a massive annual salary of $270,000 Australian dollars for this top-tier CIO role. Keep in mind, this is public money, intended to pay for top-level expertise to protect and manage government systems.
She didn't manage to stay in the role for a full year, of course. Her tenure lasted a mere 7 weeks. Just over a month. But in that short window of time, she actually pocketed $33,000 of that taxpayer-funded salary before the entire facade finally crumbled.
And she didn't just enrich herself. When she had the power of a government executive, she immediately abused that public office. She awarded a lucrative, unearned IT contract worth $21,000 to her own brother, Alan Corkill. And to justify this nepotism, her brother also lied, submitting a letter claiming he was a senior leadership official with 20 years of experience and falsely stating he had worked with her at Wadif.
So the crucial point here is the staggering total cost to the taxpayer. When you factor in the salaries paid, the fraudulent contracts, the massive departmental inquiries, the extensive investigations by the independent commissioner against corruption, and the costly process of recruiting a replacement, the total system cost of her deception exceeded $750,000, $750,000, all because a basic background check failed to catch a fake resume.
Which brings us to Section 3. Corruption and the unraveling. As you can imagine, a house of cards built on this much deceit can only stand for so long, and the speed of this unraveling was breathtaking. The core crimes were committed between May and June of 2017, right when she was hired. But just 7 weeks later, officials grew highly suspicious. According to reports, Theriault was suffering from bipolar disorder, and a deterioration in her mental condition was actually the first thing that alerted officials that something was seriously wrong. She was terminated, and officers from the Independent Commissioner Against Corruption swiftly stepped in and arrested both her and her brother. Finally, jumping ahead to December 2019, she pleaded guilty to deception, dishonestly dealing with documents, and abuse of public office, leading directly to her sentencing.
The severity of her actions was made abundantly clear in court. As Judge Michael Boylan stated during sentencing, you fraudulently obtained employment for which you were paid a large salary and in the course of which you may have had access to sensitive material. That last part is genuinely chilling. A completely unvetted individual with access to the state's premier and cabinet data. Noting that her offending was sophisticated and required planning, the judge sentenced Theriault to 25 months in prison with a 12-month non-parole period, taking her mental health struggles into account. Her brother received a suspended sentence for his role in the fraud.
And this brilliantly illustrates Section 4, Systemic Lessons for HR.
This case is not just some bizarre true crime anomaly. It is a blaring alarm bell for human resources and corporate governance everywhere. To ensure a massive vetting failure like this never happens again, specific systemic fixes are absolutely required. First, let's look at the vetting failure of trusting candidate-supplied documents. The required HR action? Direct institutional verification. Organizations must never rely on payslips, transcripts, or doctor's notes just handed over by the candidate. You must verify these directly with the issuing institutions. Second, the failure of fake references. The required action here is independent vetting. Never trust a mobile number provided on a resume. Hiring managers need to validate referee contact details through official corporate switchboards. And finally, the failure of insider dealing. This requires immediate nepotism audits. Agencies must implement dual authorization controls for external procurement contracts to ensure a rogue executive can't just hand thousands of dollars to an unvetted family member. Because as this case proves, when a candidate is willing to completely fake their foundational identity, they are almost certainly willing to exploit the very systems they are hired to protect. It forces us to ask a deeply uncomfortable question. What vulnerabilities currently exist in your own organization's hiring systems? If someone submitted a supermodel's photo and a fabricated MBA tomorrow, would your processes catch it, or would they slip right through the cracks into the C-suite? In an age of endless digital manipulation, we must remember that truth remains the most essential credential of all. Thank you for joining me for this explainer. I'll leave you to think about just